Welcome to the first Electric Dreams online conference. My name is Tue Huynh, and I am one of the Electric Dreams conference producers. Before we begin, I'm just going to give you some logistics. Please use the chat box to put in any comments or reactions to the discussion. We'd like you to be as active as possible. We'll be holding a Q&A session at the end for 10 to 15 minutes. So throughout the panel, when a question pops into mind, click on the Q&A option at the bottom and type it in. The questions will be collated and posed at the end. This event is being live captioned in order to make it fully accessible. If you would like to use the captioning service, please use the link provided in the chat box, which will open in a separate window. Alternatively, you can use the Zoom captions by clicking Show Subtitles in the closed captioning box, although these will have a short delay. We have Louise Pepper, who will be live captioning until 4:50 and will need a break before our next panel. So please stay on as the Q&A will continue until 5. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Kat Cizek, for Deepfakes, Shallow Fakes. Enjoy and have fun.
Hey Tue, thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here, to be kicking off the Electric Dreams conference. And I'm over the moon to be speaking with Halsey Burgund and Fran Panetta about their just launched deepfake documentary called Event of Moon Disaster. Now, deepfakes first arrived on the scene a few years ago in the form of celebrity pornographic videos, revenge porn, fake news, hoaxes, and even financial fraud. But now, in the hands of artists, deepfakes, or synthetic media, allow us to expose, challenge, enlighten, provoke, and even delight. An Event of Moon Disaster is one such artistic deepfake. It's one of the leading deepfake documentary explorations, and its target is a president, a dead president. It takes the form of a physical installation as well as a digital web project. Today with Fran and Halsey, we'll see some of the project, we'll go behind the scenes, we'll talk about deepfakes, shallow fakes, what can be done to guard against mis and disinformation, as well as how AI, or artificial intelligence, can be used in creative practices. We'll open up to your questions in the last 10 minutes. So as Tue said, please queue up your questions in the QA box where Tue will be corralling our questions. Just by way of quick introductions, I'm here on behalf of IMMERSE, an online publication dedicated to the emergent forms of nonfiction. IMMERSE is a co-presenter of today's, this particular event with Electric Dreams. IMMERSE is a publication that's part of the MIT Open Documentary Lab, where I am the artistic director of the co-creation studio. And I've had the pleasure of knowing and witnessing this project come to fruition. Halsey is a fellow at ODL, and Fran is also part of our community. She's the creative director of the Center of Advanced Virtuality at MIT. She's a multi-award-winning digital artist and journalist. Fran was executive editor at of virtual reality at The Guardian, where she led immersive innovation for over a decade, including running their in-house virtual reality production studio. Halsey is a sound artist and technologist. He combines modern technologies, such as mobile phones and artificial intelligence, with fundamentally human technologies, primarily voice, language, and music. He is the creator of Roundware, the open source contributory audio AR platform. That's a mouthful. It's used to create art and educational installations for cultural organizations internationally. Good morning, Halsey, in Boston or the moon. And afternoon, Fran, also in the moon, but perhaps in London. Can you set up this film before we play it?
Absolutely, yeah. So the project started with a contingency speech that was written by Bill Safire, who was one of Richard Nixon's speechwriters. And it was written for the Apollo 11 mission if it had gone tragically wrong. So obviously the mission itself was really risky, and one of the most likely scenarios was that the astronauts wouldn't be able to return from the moon back to Earth. And so this speech is written in this context, as if the astronauts are still on the moon, unable to return. So of course we know that the Apollo 11 mission went well and this speech was never delivered, but this speech itself was archived in the National Archives. So as a kind of reminder that things could have been very different.
So we had two primary goals with our project Independent Moon Disaster. One is to explore new types of technology, in this case, artificial intelligence and specifically deepfake technology, as a new mode of artistic expression. We are artists and we love the creative uses of technology. So that was one of our very exciting goals that we were going for with this project, as we feel there's a lot of potential with synthetic media to be used in artistic ways. And the second equally important goal was to demonstrate the effect that deepfakes are having and will likely continue to have on the ecosystem of mis and disinformation in our lives and in society right now. So we created this alternative reality in which Apollo 11 wasn't successful, as Fran mentioned. The astronauts were stranded on the moon, and President Nixon had to deliver this eulogy to a global audience, both sort of mourning the loss of life of the astronauts individually, but also, speaking about the human spirit of exploration. And as you will see later in this talk, we will pull back the curtain, so to speak, in an attempt to demystify deepfakes, how they are made, what to look out for, and how to hopefully avoid being misled by them. But first, let's roll the film and jump into a very different version of history.
Armstrong and Aldrin are scheduled to set foot on the moon.
That's kind of like a pitch change rather than an acceleration increase.
This is CBS News color coverage of Man on the Moon. Sponsored by Kellogg's. Kellogg's puts more in your morning. Here from CBS News Apollo headquarters at Kennedy Space Center, correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good morning. It's T-minus 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 53 seconds and counting in just an hour and a half. If all goes well, Apollo 11 astronauts, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins are to lift off from pad 39A out there on the voyage man always has dreamed about. Next stop for them, the moon. So it is now that there is time, if only briefly in this busy morning, to think of those three men and the burdens and the hopes that they carry on behalf of all mankind. Here's Jack King in Launch Control.
We're approaching the 60-second mark on the Apollo 11 mission. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy, it looks good, Wally.
Clear.
Somebody must be leaving town.
Building shaking. Getting that buffeting we've become used to. What a moment. Man on the way to the moon.
Hello, Houston. Hello, Houston. This is Apollo 11. I'm reading you loud and clear. Go ahead, over. Listen, Dave, everything's going just swimmingly. We see out our side windows the sun going by, and of course, out one of our windows right now, we've got the Earth. Roger. Time to begin maneuver is 3:05:03. We approach the moon will gradually grow larger and larger in size. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Okay, how are you looking? All your systems go?
The 1202.
Copy. Say again.
Copy. 1201. 1201.
Roger, 1201. 1202. Low level.
Now, well may be the problem here, and we can monitor Delta 8.
What do you think, Don?
That's terrible. Let me try auto again. I'll see what happens. 1 minute. 1 minute.
Roger, we got you.
Will be dead.
Roger, you've lost misfit. Lost data flight. We've had shutdown.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace. These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery. But they also know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice. These two men are laying down their lives in mankind's most noble goal, to search for truth and understanding. They will be mourned by their families and friends. They will be mourned by their nation. They will be mourned by the people of the world. They will be mourned by a Mother Earth that dared send 2 of her sons into the unknown. In their exploration, they stirred the people of the world to feel as one. In their sacrifice, they bind more tightly the brotherhood of man. In ancient days, men looked at stars and saw the heroes in the constellations. In modern times, we do much the same, but our heroes are epic men of flesh and blood. Others will follow and surely find their way home. Man's search will not be denied. But these men were the first, and they will remain the foremost in our hearts. For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind. Good night.
Roger. Looks good.
Check your sources. Fake, fake trigger warning.
Copy. Roger. Columbia Eagle, have you about maneuvered there yet?
Fake trigger warning. Now, before we go further, we thought we'd like to ask all of you in the audience to take a little poll. So 2A is going to call up a quick poll, and we're going to ask you 4 questions. Was the text of the speech you just saw real? You just click on your screen and tell us what you think. Was Nixon's face real? Was Nixon's voice real? Was the film footage real? What do you all think? Let's do a quick poll. Are we getting some answers? Two-way, do we have any early results on this election, July election?
We're on the edge of our seats here. This is
there we go.
There we go. Look at that.
What do you think? What do you make of this?
Wow, well, it seems that people think the speech, the text of the speech was real, at least at this point. That's encouraging. I don't want to give it away for anybody who's still answering, but.
No bias there. All right, we got a 50-50 on the face. We've got a little bit more fake going on the voice, and the film footage, half and half.
Huh.
I think we can close this poll.
That's really
You haven't voted. You have a few seconds left. Mail it in. Fran, what do you think?
You know, it's not that different from the poll that we did on our site, which we'll give you a bit of a glimpse of later on. But yeah, we ask these questions, and Halsey and I have been looking at the stats to see what people have thought, and it's pretty similar, that they get that the speech was a real speech. I mean, I gave you a bit of clue by talking about that at the beginning of this talk. But yeah, the face, people really think the face is realistic. So it's about half and half on our site. The voice seems to be a little bit more discernible. So yeah, it was a synthetic voice. It was a video dialogue replacement, as we say in the credits. So yeah, we used AI to do the face as well. The archive footage is all real. So yeah, we've done some deceptive editing, reversing, and editing things in a way to really pull some drama in there. But yeah, it's all original Apollo 11 footage.
And we'll get to how you did this in a bit, but you did show this also to experts before revealing the tech you used. Maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. We worked with Scientific American, who did a half-hour documentary, and they launched it on their site at the same time as we launched our website last week. And they interviewed really like the top people in the field. So they had people from human rights, from experts on AI, digital privacy, law. And they started this documentary by showing our film and getting their reactions.
Will stay on the moon to rest in peace.
Love it. And I didn't expect to. I was kind of waiting to get annoyed because there's been a number of pretty irresponsible deepfake creations, but I found myself focusing much more on the speech.
The quality of the fake videos they generate is superb, so it's very, very difficult to find anything you know, visible artifacts in the video.
People believe things because of contextual clues. They rely on the fact you've got all the peripheral cues of reality, right? You have the CBS News, you have the anchor beforehand, and those make a huge difference because we rely on those cues to tell us if something's real.
Found myself thinking about the value of deepfakes in immersing people into an alternate reality, so long, of course, as they know that that's what they're about to be immersed in.
It was a great fake. I've seen a lot of bad ones, and we've seen the technology develop so quickly, so that deepfake was incredibly convincing and provokes a conversation not only about that moment in time, but of course about the problem of misinformation, which I think you're ably doing here.
What technologies are getting better and better here? What did you use to make this, Halsey and Fran?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just sort of reiterate the definition of what a deepfake is first, and then talk a bit about what we specifically did to create our quote-unquote complete deepfake. So essentially, a deepfake, the term comes from a combination of deep learning, which is a form of artificial intelligence, and fake, obviously something that isn't real. So a deep fake is a piece of media, audio and or video, that has been manipulated using artificial intelligence to portray a person doing something, saying something, being in a situation that never actually occurred in reality. And typically deepfakes are created without the consent of the individuals represented. So for us, like I said a second ago, we wanted to create sort of what we call a complete deepfake, which is both audio and video. We really wanted to sort of use the most modern available technologies to create as sort of complete a fake as possible, if you will. And there were two parts to that. The video part was, quite different than the audio part, obviously. And I'll just go through a sort of I'll try to simplify it and go quickly through the explanation. But most deepfakes are actually just visual and just called face swapping, where you take one face of somebody and you put it onto the body of somebody else. And in our case, we use something much more subtle and much more sort of believable, I think, which is called a process called video dialogue replacement, which essentially takes just the mouth motions of an actor saying something and maps those onto a target video of the person who you want to manipulate and have seen to be doing something that they never did. So in our case, the target video was President Nixon. We took a slice of his resignation speech and of the same length as the speech that we wanted him to deliver. We had an actor deliver that speech, and then we gave both of those to a company called Canny AI, who specializes in this technology. And they essentially mapped the mouth motions of the actor onto the target video of President Nixon, and that gave us the sort of visual part. The really great thing about this technique is that so much of the majority of the video that you end up seeing remains authentic. It's all the head bobbing, the turning of pages, the zooming in of the camera angle, all that remains completely as it was originally, but we just have the lips and the mouth moving differently to represent these different words. So that was a visual part. The audio part was a bit more complicated in that we had to basically train an artificial intelligence model to be able to convert our actor's voice into the voice of President Nixon. We used a process called speech-to-speech voice conversion and worked with a company called Respeecher out of the Ukraine. And they essentially, we wanted to use speech-to-speech rather than text-to-speech because that enables us to keep the performative aspects of the speech. So we could tell our actor, slow down, pause here a little bit, emphasize this word, whatnot. And then essentially we are directing President Nixon because those nuances of the actor's performance would be converted into President Nixon's voice. So we had to do a lot of training of the models so it understood our actor's voice and understood President Nixon's voice and understood how to map between those. So we spent many days recording clips, short clips of President Nixon, and recording clips. Our actor recorded clips of things that President Nixon said, little clips of his previous speeches, and you'll see some video of this in a second. And that basically gave us a set of training data, a parallel set of data that the AI could ingest and say, great, the actor saying this means that it would be President Nixon saying this. And then I can, if I do this thousands of times, I can understand how to convert. So after we created the model, we had the actor deliver the speech itself. And then essentially with the model ready to do the conversion, it could convert the actor saying anything at all into President Nixon saying anything at all. So that is, we gave maybe 20 versions of the speech to the system, and it pumped out 20 versions of Nixon delivering it. And then we kind of chose the best parts and did a bunch of post-production work to really fine-tune things. But the bulk of the work in many ways was done by the artificial intelligence. So pretty crazy. So I thought we could now show you guys some behind-the-scenes footage from the creation process so you can get a little bit of a better idea of how we went about this.
This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office, where so many decisions have been made that shape the history of this nation.
Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon
to rest in peace.
And do what I believe is right.
And do what I believe is right. And do what I believe is right.
And do what I believe is right.
What's right? Was.
And do what I believe is right.
Okay.
Yeah.
For every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come will know that there is some corner of another world that is forever mankind. Good night.
So you mentioned that you worked with a video company in Israel and an audio company in Ukraine. Very interesting. There are deep fakes, but there are also shallow fakes. Can you talk to us about that continuum?
Yeah, I mentioned some of the shallow fake techniques that we used just a moment ago, but they're the kind of really traditional techniques of misinformation that we've seen for centuries. So misattributing something, whether it's text, whether it's picture, whether it's a video. So saying something is, in a different context. It could be deceptive editing of a video. So you saw that in our film, editing that footage really quickly so it looked like there was an emergency on the Eagle, and we used little snippets of audio to repeat the one. We went through all of the footage to try and get the most dramatic and bits of jeopardy along the mission, which was really hard because those astronauts are really, really calm. But we took out whatever we could get that had any sense of panic in it, and you can see we repeated those. We built in sound design. Those are all cheap fake techniques. We reversed the Eagle going from the moon back up into space, and we reversed it so it looked like it was crashing down onto the moon. Again, slowing or reversing footage is another technique. So this is all stuff that people can do at home. You're all really familiar with this. So cheap fakes, deep fakes use AI. So some of this can be done quite easily. Halsey was talking about face swapping. There are apps which use face swapping. The AI techniques that we use were much more sophisticated. As you can see by the video, it's really high quality. So these production companies are right at the kind of top of the league in terms of using machine learning to be able to create these kind of videos and synthetic audio. So it's a range from easy and very, 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 from text to AI, basically.
And it adds up, right? This stuff adds up. And then it also creates something that Danielle Citron calls the liar's dividend, which is the idea that the fact that deepfakes exist allow for a kind of accusation or target or a fog of truth. Can you talk to us about this notion of post-fact society, especially in a time of an election?
Yeah, we end up in a situation where we can plausibly deny everything, because you can turn around and say, it's misinformation, it's a deep fake, how do you know it's true? And so we end up in this situation where we're in a kind of zero truth society where everything is deniable. And, that is incredibly dangerous when it comes to politics and when it comes to democracy. So a lot of the experts that we interviewed when we were researching the project, they were less worried about the deep fakes themselves that got out. It was more around this kind of destabilizing of truth and trust.
And so with your project, this is at the core of what you're trying to do. And you put a lot of work, not just into the film, into the AI and the technology, but a lot of the context and the pedagogical tools that you built around, and a lot of media partnerships that you also set up. You mentioned the Scientific American, but there are many others. Why did you do this? Why did you make such a contextual place to go?
I guess the simple answer is that we didn't want to purvey misinformation. We didn't want to create misinformation and add to this fog, as we've been referring to. We wanted to actually give an example of misinformation and then be very, 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 very clear that what we did was not in fact true, and it was, it was faked, and here's how we did it. And, the hope is by, again, I use the phrase pulling back the curtain. I think that's rather appropriate in the sense that we want people to understand that, there are techniques that people use to create stuff that's as believable as what we created. Even if the Apollo 11, you know at your core that this didn't happen, that you still can get drawn in by the sort of emotional and aesthetic and storytelling aspects of this film. And our hope is that people can sort of transfer that into their regular everyday lives and be a little more skeptical about what's coming through their social media feeds and what they are ingesting and what they are sharing, almost more importantly in a lot of ways. And to check your sources, to think about what it is that you are sort of helping to put out there into the world, because there are lots of bad actors, so to speak, who are trying to trick us using shallow fakes, deep fakes, using everything on this full spectrum of misinformation. And we really hope that our website shows, gives people a lot of information for how to educate themselves, how to learn more about what a deepfake is, how we made it, and hopefully that will help protect individuals. And then as more and more individuals know, then society can kind of be somewhat inoculated against this. There are obviously many approaches that can be taken to help, that need to be taken, in fact, to help society be ready for whatever might happen. I think we've been somewhat lucky thus far to not have had any massive sort of politically focused deep fakes that have come out yet, but we're a little concerned about that for sure. So you can see now, this is part of our website. You just saw parts of the quiz that that we sort of gave to you guys as well. And then this is the bulk of the actual information, educational resources on the website. As you pan around the lunar surface, you can check out our explainer, which explains more of how we created the deepfake, some of what I went through earlier, some little videos, and then there's a bunch of articles that also go into some of the concerns that we have about deepfakes and what you can do to combat them. So yeah, I think that's, yes, deepfake 101, a little more in-depth definition of deepfakes, etc. So we hope that people will check this out and dive in.
Witness.org, the human rights media organization, has done a lot on deepfakes. Sam Gregory's featured in your expert panel there. And they talk a lot about don't panic, but prepare. There's a lot of solutions that are being offered by technology startups and the technology community to try and have a tech solutionist approach to discovering and finding these deep fakes. The legal community is certainly on this, and the media industry is trying to tackle this too. And I'm just wondering, what is the spectrum of how we're going to deal with this as they become more prevalent?
Yeah, it's probably not one of those options, it's probably all of them. There really isn't one good solution. So it's a question of kind of doing everything we can. So there are some very clever computer scientists that you were kind of indicating there, who are trying to find ways of detecting if something is a deep fake. And actually, Scientific American took our film to an academic over in the University of Albany who ran it through his system and said, yeah, I can tell this is deep fake. So even though it's really hard for us to see it, with the human eye, the computer could see that. Now that's a kind of cat and mouse game, because, as soon as he has developed, his software that can detect the deep fakes, slightly more sophisticated deepfakes will be invented. So, that is one part. As you say, law is also, a useful thing to combat misinformation. There is kind of issues around freedom of expression, and, is all synthetic media going to be outlawed? Well, that's problematic as well. So, as we were talking about, cheap fake misinformation is really just as worrying as the kind of AI misinformation. So, all of these things have got, things that don't make it the perfect solution.
You've seen a lot of deep fakes.
Yeah.
You've watched a lot of them. Has anything surprised you or shocked you, or what has your emotional reactions to the work that you've seen out there?
I mean, a lot of them are fun that we've seen. I mean, gosh, most of the deepfakes out there are porn, and I've seen none of those. But the ones that I have seen have been satirical, or have been kind of hinting at how they can be used politically. So, you know, I think that at the moment, lots of them are quite obvious, and you can kind of see the edges. But I think that at the moment, it's kind of hinting at what's possible.
Yeah, and our project really sort of focuses on the the media literacy part of the the multi-pronged approach to combating this. And you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be terribly complicated to sort of be more aware, be more skeptical, be more sort of thinking about what you're consuming. And I had a fun experience. A friend of mine is a 5th and 6th grade teacher, and he asked me to come to his class virtually and sort of present the work. So I went to this class of, I guess, 11-year-olds primarily, and kind of set up the film and said I was a filmmaker, and didn't talk about any of the setup that we did here. Just sort of played them the film just to sort of see what happened as a little bit of a guinea pig situation. And at the end of the film, there was kind of this, all the little faces in Zoom were sitting there, and they were kind of like silent for a few seconds. And then one kid was like, hold it, I thought Buzz Aldrin was still alive. There's something weird going on here. And then I was like, oh, interesting. And then they proceeded to go to Google, and they Googled, is Buzz Aldrin alive? And they immediately found that, in fact, he is. And they came back and were like, what are you doing here? What's going, something's right. You're trying to trick us here, and you're trying to fool us, and we're on to you now. And I was really encouraged by that. It was a wonderful sort of example of how just some logical thinking and taking the time to step back and do a little Google searching, do a little, trying to corroborate what you've just experienced, and then understand that, everything that comes to you, even if presented in a class, by somebody who's invited to that class by your teacher, even that, there might be some things going on that aren't exactly as they appear. So I was quite encouraged by the younger generation in this, and I think we can all learn a lesson from that to just take a few moments when something seems unbelievable or something seems too believable in some ways. Confirmation bias. We all want to believe this, that, and the other thing, and we jump on the things that agree with us already. So I like that anecdote as a way that we can all sort of proceed. And as far as what else needs to happen, I think, Kat, you hit on a very, very important point before in speaking about Sam Gregory, which is that we don't want to freak everybody out. We don't want to leave people thinking, oh my God, they've rewritten history now, everything is fake, and I can't believe anything anymore at all. That is emphatically what we want to avoid. We hope that education can sort of help people understand that, yes, these things are possible, but yes, also there are many ways, and many smart people and everybody individually can work to inoculate society as a whole against these things. Photoshop was crazy when it came out. Nobody can believe a photo ever again because we can manipulate them. And now at this point, we're fairly good about picking out fake photos. Not entirely, but I mean, sky isn't falling on that one anymore. So I think we're moving in a good direction. Right now we're out of time because this technology is new, and it takes society a little while to get used to this stuff. And that's again why we one of the reasons we put this project out into the world, to try to really help with that in this transition that society will make. In 5 years, I don't know, people will look at our deepfake and say how quaint, and people will understand immediately. I don't know what's going to happen, but we hope we can provide a role in helping society get through this.
It's so interesting that you frame this within a historical context, because it really is a generational issue too. I mean, the kids are on this, right? Like deep fakes, shallow fakes, that's all happening all the time with all the filters and all the platforms that the young people are on all the time. So it's really it's just such an interesting way to address it with this archival and historical moment to
especially right now. I'm sorry, especially right now when everybody is like, there is no real world right now because we can't be with people in this pandemic, and it's almost everything has become a little, fully mediated by screens and by digital stuff, and that makes it, almost more insidious that the fakery that can happen in these worlds. So it's a particularly fraught time that we're going through right now, but I remain optimistic.
Yeah, our screen time is definitely higher every week. We're going to open up to questions now. There's a few, I think, lined up in the Q&A box, and Tuwe, our producer from Electric Dreams, will present some questions. What are people asking? What's on people's minds?
Well, I think there's been a bit of a flurry of messages, I think specifically asking how easy it is to make these deep fakes. And like, can people use any kind of like easy software at home? Can it be produced on their phone and on the fly? So if for example, if you were just walking around and someone captured someone's face, and then could you quickly turn it around, represent their face to be saying something that they wouldn't ordinarily say?
Or even real time. Is this possible real time? That's a big question, Halsey, maybe.
Yes, well, actually, this is not my real face. I am actually, no, I'm just kidding. Real time is, we're getting there. We're getting to the real time thing. I was speaking with the company, Respeecher, that did our voice conversion, and they are pretty close to, they give it maybe a year or so, and the technology will be good enough to convert, sub 500 millisecond kind of, essentially real time conversion of voice on, on a computer that isn't a crazy GPU. So we're getting towards those. As far as how easy it is generally, doing crude stuff is fairly easy. I think the crude stuff is it certainly can be damaging, and it can certainly fool people. So a certain amount of caution should be, taken, and awareness should be there. But, our deepfake took us, we estimate approximately sort of 3 months of concerted effort working with, an actor in a studio and two companies and lots of post-production work and all of that. So doing what we did was definitely more involved and isn't something people are just going to do on a lark and, oh, that's fun, I'm just going to go spend 3 months and do this. So it's not really super easy right now. That said, these technologies are going to become more and more democratized, and people are going to start to be able to make these more easily. So there is open source software that does face swapping right now that anybody can grab and do with a modicum of Python experience. And again, making a good one, a convincing one is hard, but getting sort of 80% of the way there is doable at this point.
Great, thank you. I guess more directed into the video that you produce is like a few people wondering, did the age of the footage make it a lot easier to mask that it's a fake?
I think in some ways yes, and in some ways no. I think people were quite forgiving because it's old footage and the clarity of it. We are not used to the kind of really super high fidelity. But it also did trip us up a little bit, especially the audio. The training data was really dirty, so we did EQ it and we tried to clean it up, but they really struggled. This is Respeecher, the company that we were working with. They struggled with having such dirty data to be dealing with. So they said that the quality was less than they would have been able to have if they'd had two parallel, very, very clean, tightly recorded recordings. So I think a little bit of both.
Great, thank you. So here's a kind of an interesting question. What is the value to purpose deepfakes to imagine a new world, like the pantheon of deepfake world leaders apologizing for climate change at the World Economic Forum?
Right, there was actually an example of which Extinction Rebellion did a little while ago, which was the Belgian Prime Minister giving a climate change speech, which was kind of along these lines. I personally think that's interesting, but also it strays into the territory of kind of playing around with democracy and politics. I find that problematic personally. I do think that the potential to imagine other possibilities of greater futures, of worlds we would like to live in, also reimagining history from other perspectives. We've talked, we've heard a lot during the last couple of months of how history has been portrayed from just one narrative perspective. So I think also looking at what other ways history can be narrated is interesting. So I think there is really creative possibility with synthetic media, but I would err away from putting words into the mouths of people without their consent. I mean, for me, that is the problem. If people have not consented, and especially if they're alive and they're prominent figures, then for me, that's really problematic.
There is an interesting, a really fascinating project. It was one of the other projects in the Mozilla cohort of Creative Media Awards that our project was a part of last year by an artist named Stephanie Lepp. It's not yet released, but it's to be released pretty soon. I don't know the exact date. It's called Deep Reckonings, which essentially takes some public figures and has them deliver speeches using deepfake technology that are reckonings for them. So the one example is Brett Kavanaugh. So the whole in the U.S., Brett Kavanaugh was for those who aren't into Supreme Court politics, was nominated for the Supreme Court, and he had accusations of sexual assault, and he went through hearings about that and denied everything. And the idea here was to create a speech for him to deliver, which was a reckoning, which was saying, I made a mistake. I should have been more forthcoming about this, that, and the other thing. I should have not done this. I should have, and Stephanie really wrote this beautiful speech and had Brett Kavanaugh sort of deliver it. And Fran's absolutely right. This is tricky business here with putting words into people's mouths, especially prominent folks like this. But there is something about the experience of seeing somebody deliver a speech of that nature, which I think can be useful in certain circumstances and can sort of point to a future or possibilities that maybe aren't here now, but maybe could be. Maybe it's too utopian, but it is an interesting approach to using this technology in a new way.
There's another example of using this technology. I think it's one of the first times in a really interesting way as the witness protection system for characters in a documentary film, and the filmmakers wanted to protect the identities of very vulnerable people. The film is called Welcome to Chechnya, and they extensively used this kind of technology, the filmmaker David France, to use deep fakes for good. So we're seeing really interesting creative applications of this technology. Are there any more questions, Tue?
Yes, I think we've got room for one more question. So media has been always problematic in politics due to gender and racial inequalities, and now social media manipulation. Movies aren't supposed to be real, right? So that only give us a measure of subjective truth in dramatic content. Should we consider another mode, local modes of communication, and go back to live stumping? I think it's live streaming? Live stumping? What are the alternatives in an election year?
Live stumping.
Hard to live stump right now, isn't it? It's that's again a complication with the current pandemic situation where we're pushed digitally. So
yeah, we've been forced into virtual worlds, and we're seeing a lot of those stump speeches being forced online, the conventions. We're not going to have a lot of choice, I don't think, especially if the numbers continue the way they are in America. So I don't know. I think that I think it's going to be very tricky this November, because I think that there is going to be a lot of the campaigning is going to have to be online, and it does make it much harder to verify things when everything is virtual.
If there's an election.
Oh gosh, what a sad note to end on.
Well, that's it. This is like anything is possible now, right? It's a shallow fake.
Oh,
Okay, we got to somehow bring this back to positive spin.
Yeah, come on, we need something positive to end on.
Sure. Well, verification. I mean, do you want to tell us a little bit about verification? You know, what is verification? What are ways to make sure that we know what we're seeing is what we're understanding?
Yeah, I guess witness have been the people. Sam Gregory again has been the one who's really been investigating what options there are. Everything from kind of watermarking, digital verification. And he's been doing a lot of this work in human rights context for years and years. So that's basically making sure there is metadata on your media to really prove that it is where you say it was, with who you say was there. I mean, I guess the problem is it can become very expensive if you end up having to verify everything you're doing all the time, and it becomes another problem in terms of inequity, who's got the resources and the power to be able to essentially kind of verify everything, all your media and everything you're doing all the time. But yeah, it's another tool, and a good one, to add to the kind of arsenal that we were talking about earlier on.
Yeah, and even things as simple as having 2 camera angles of everything, and being able to verify, those are time stamped the same or something. It's a lot harder to create 2 separate deep fakes of the same thing that really line up with each other than it is to set up a second camera. So I mean, these are the kinds of simple things. I wait the time when hairstyles change in order to defeat deep fakes by having really long bangs in front of your face that flop around all the time. And that might be a sort of ridiculous, but in some ways an interesting thought about how these technologies can be defeated sometimes by very simple methods. And
Absolutely, moving from just media literacy into digital literacy, and now a lot of people, such as Joy Balwami's work also around algorithmic bias, we need perhaps algorithmic literacy and procedural literacy so that people understand how these machines can make so many millions of artifacts, and how we relate to them in the world and the moon. Thank you so much. We're really honored to have you. Thank you for taking the time and for this incredible project. I'd like to also thank Tue Huynh, our producer, to Doug Hunt for the amazing technical support. All the videos ran smoothly and they were synced. That's awesome. Louise Pepper for the wonderful live captions, and to the phenomenal Electric Dreamers, Mark Atkins and Tom Millen. You're wonderful. On behalf of my colleagues at IMMERSE, our biggest thanks to all of you out there in the world for joining. Thank you.